Hi, everyone. My name is Carla Berry, and today is an applications workshop that I'm offering in partnership with the Safety Harbor and Seminole Public Libraries. This workshop is recorded, so if you want access to the recording to review anything that we cover today, feel free to reach out to me and I will happily share that recording with you. If you have any questions, please use the chat box and you should be able to, let me just fix that in here. For some reason, it is not automated, so I have to manually set that every time. You should be able to chat with me and other participants using the chat box. You can also use the Q&A feature to ask a question, and I really encourage questions during this workshop. We are going to be covering a lot of material, so it is very helpful for me to know when you have a question, if I need to go back and go into more detail about something that I've covered, or maybe touch on something that I wasn't planning on focusing today that is important to you. So again, my name is Carla Berry, and let's dive into college applications. So I sent a handout to all of you via email earlier today, and I'm going to share it here too on my screen. Navigating applications. So I would love to get to know you better today. If you can put in the chat box your name and your grade and where you go to high school. And if you already have an idea of where you will be applying to college, if you can also add that to the chat box, that would be great so that I can get to know you just a little bit better. And I'll be looking at those responses in just a few minutes here. But when you're starting applications, it is a good idea to start gathering information. So we are going to log into the Common App in just a minute. And the Common App is a centralized application service that allows you to pretty much apply to several colleges through one portal. So you only need to enter your basic demographic information one time and list your activities and honors and so forth one time. And that information is shared with all the colleges where you are applying to. And then there will be different personal statement questions, maybe for the different colleges. If you choose to fill out different personal statement answers, you could do that for the different colleges. So you can edit your application within the Common App as you go to submit your application. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit confusing, so I really want to make sure that I'm able to transfer that information well to you. So within the Common App, you submit one application at a time, but it allows you to work on all your applications at once. So you are able to modify your information, such as your personal statement, between submitting applications. So I can use one personal statement for UF and another personal statement for the University of Miami if I choose to do so. I could also select a different major for different universities. So I see some responses here already, which is great. So what information should you gather? You're going to need information from your parents, where they went to school, basic information about where you live, and so forth. So biographical information, we'll call that. Should gather all biographical information. It will even ask you information about step parents and step siblings if you have those, or half siblings and your siblings, of course. So make sure that you have all of that information handy if at all possible. You're also going to need your GPA and your class rank. Not all schools have a class rank, so if your school does not, that is okay. This is something that I would check with your guidance counselor, specifically how to input that information, since that is very school specific. Your courses. So what courses have you taken in the past, and what courses are you going to be taking your senior year? So courses, I'm going to highlight and just say a little something about. Oops, because that is particularly important. I meant to make that courses. So for your senior year courses, especially, you are basically anticipating that you're going to be taking those classes. Once you submit your applications, you are pretty much locked into those courses. If you choose to drop a course after you've submitted your applications, you need to contact everywhere you apply to and let them know that you have dropped that course. Generally, when I'm working with students one-on-one, I advise them to contact the universities where they've applied to before they drop a course and ask them if it may impact their application's decision if you do drop that course. And most of the time, universities have responded, yes, it will impact their decision. So I strongly advise against changing courses senior year, if at all possible, after you have submitted your applications. Before you submit, you are free to change because you do not necessarily have to tell them that you drop down from an honors class to a regular class, or you switched your electives. That information doesn't need to be shared if you haven't submitted your applications yet. But after you submit your applications, you will be basically forced to share that information since you want everything in your applications to be accurate. You're also going to want to list all your activities and any honors. So within the Common App, and most of you will be using, if not all of you will be using the Common App, you can list 10 activities and 5 honors. Sometimes there is going to be a little bit of overlap. Let's say you are in NHS and through NHS, you do some volunteering, but you have more than 10 activities. So maybe you just list NHS under honors. Or maybe you have too many honors, you have more than 5, and you don't have that many activities, so you choose to list NHS and describe that volunteering under activities, and you do not list NHS under honors. So there is some wiggle room between activities and honors, like you can go back and forth depending on what it is, and you feel free to email me if you ever have a question where to put something, or you have too many activities or too many honors, or not, or you feel that you do not have enough of one or the other to get some ideas. So those are things that you're going to want to gather before you even start the application process. As far as activities and honors, only activities and honors that you participated in and received in the summer after 8th grade and onwards count. So let's say you won the state spelling bee in 7th grade. You cannot list that, even though that is awesome. Maybe you can incorporate that into your personal statement somehow, but you cannot list that as an honor. And then we also want to decide whether you need to use the Common App or the Coalition app. I think all of you are Florida students, and for most Florida schools, and for I'd say 99% of students, oh, I'm gonna sneeze, students that I work with, sorry about that. They're going to be using the Common App, but definitely search within both databases to see where the schools that you're planning to apply to are listed. You also may need some supplemental essays. This is information you want to look at before you even start. So you may know about the personal statement already. I once had a student and she was in the IB program at Palm Harbor, super smart. And I asked her to send me her personal statement draft, and she sent me one sentence because she thought the personal statement was just a statement, just one sentence about herself. And that was an amazing sentence that she sent to me. But your personal statement is, in fact, an entire essay, 650 words that you're going to submit to schools. And that personal statement is as important as your GPA, as your test scores, as your activities. It's a really important essay that's part of your applications. But some schools also require supplemental essays in addition to the personal statement. If you are applying to UF, for instance, you will need to write some supplemental essays for them. And they're generally just short paragraph responses. They're not as long as the personal statement. If you are applying to an honors program at a university, you'll generally have supplemental essays for the honors program or any kind of special program that you may apply to. There will generally be supplemental essays. And then proofreading for consistency. So in years past, I offered an application pro course. I wasn't able to offer it last year. I'm not sure yet if I'll be able to offer it this year. But in that course, I emphasized so much how important it is to proofread your application for consistency. And you will not believe, even for students that have taken that course, which is a great course, and have taken past workshops of mine on applications, how frequently students still forget to proofread their applications, and how I will receive panicked emails from parents and students telling me that the applications have already been submitted and there is a silly mistake in there. Let's say the student misspelled their middle name, or they happen to pick the wrong major in the application. There's some kind of silly mistake in there. So you generally really want to make sure that multiple people are putting their eyes on your application, printing out the PDF. So once you input all the information into the Common App, it will allow you to export a PDF of your application to review it, and that will show you what your application appears like, what it looks like when a college admissions officer sees it, and really proofread that PDF for consistency and even for accuracy, of course, and getting multiple eyes on it. So you should look at it, your parents should look at it, you can have a friend look at it, a teacher, whoever you can get to just look through it is great, because generally the more eyes you get on it, the more likely you're going to spot a silly mistake, and you want to spot those silly mistakes before you submit your applications. Okay, so application forms, what you should gather, biographical information, your GPA, class rank, courses, activities, honors, and then just making sure, do you only need the personal statement, or do you also need supplemental essays? So I really like for students to use Google Docs to organize all this information. And before we even go into the Common App, I'm going to link something for you all here. I'm going to grab the link and then I'll show you too what I sent so that you'll know how to use it. So you should see a link in the chat box. And I'm going to show it to you too. So I like using an application tracker for students. So in here, since this is for workshop participants, you can go and say file, make a copy. So you'll want to go file and make a copy so that you have your own copy of this, and you can then go and edit it, and it's your copy and I won't have access to it. So definitely start there and then input your information. So your name, your highest SAT and ACT scores, your GPA, class rank, high school, future major, future career, your courses for senior year, any login information. Then go over to applications and start listing which schools you are planning to apply to. So you're going to add 5 safety schools. So those are schools that you're pretty sure you're going to get into based on your stats. You're going to add 5 match schools. So schools that you should get into, but there's a chance that you may not get in. And then 5 reach schools, schools that you'd love to go to, but the odds are probably a little bit against you to get into those schools. You do not necessarily have to apply to 15 schools. I just have 5 spots for each one so that you can see how your applications are spread out. And to make sure that you do have some safety schools that you're applying to, and some match schools, and some reach schools that you are not only applying to, so it would be alarming to me if a student was only applying to reach schools or if a student was only applying to safety schools. We definitely want to see a healthy mix of different categories of schools. So you will add in the college university name here, what program or major you plan to apply to there, what the application deadline is. And then once you submit your application, you can change it to submitted. If you've been waitlisted, you can select that there. If you've been rejected, you can put that there. So you definitely want to update that there. Any scholarship consideration and deadlines you can add in here. So this is all part of your initial research so that you can make sure you are on top of the application process. So schools like the University of Miami and Coral Gables, for instance, that is where I went for undergrad. You have to submit your application by the priority deadline in order to be automatically considered for scholarships. If you wait until the regular deadline, you will not be considered for scholarship. So you definitely want to go and read the fine print, and I'll show you where to find that information in the Common App and make note of that information so that you don't miss out on scholarship opportunities just because you did not submit your application on time. If you visit the university or you go to a virtual info session, you definitely want to keep track of those dates and any information. And then here you can keep track of if you need to submit a supplemental essay, if it's done, if you've submitted your SAT and AC or ACT score, your transcripts, if there are any letters of recommendation, if it requires a counselor rec letter, if those rec letters have been submitted, and so forth. So you can see I have a couple of columns here highlighted in gray, and those are columns that become important after you have submitted your applications. So one of the biggest aha moments I think students have with the application process is that they learn how to use the Common App. They spend so much time in the Common App that they don't realize what happens in the Common App after they submit their applications. And after you submit your applications in the Common App, you are done with the Common App. That's why it's important to have a document where you are organizing your information outside of the Common App so that you can keep track of your applications. There is no way currently, maybe one day they'll update the Common App software so that it will allow you to track your applications in there. But currently, there's no way for you to keep track of your applications after you hit the submit button. So after you hit submit on a college application, the university will reach out to you via email and they'll send you a way to create a login for their portals. And that's going to be unique for every single university. And they will give you a student ID so you can note that information there. And then you can also note any additional information that they've requested, any correspondence. I like having students keep track here because an inbox can become kind of cluttered, can become a nightmare. And just a note on emails, and I know I'm giving you a lot of information really quickly here, but I am pretty much trying to squeeze at least 4 to 6 hours of information into 1 hour. That's why I'm talking quickly and trying to get through everything. Create an email that is professional if you do not already have one. So make sure that your email address is not hotpotato55@gmail.com, or I'm trying to think, there was something with a potato that I once saw as a student's email address. I think it was like steakandpotatoes@gmail.com. You want to make sure that you have a professional email address for your applications. But once you have that email address and you're checking it at least once a week, I recommend setting aside a day of the week. Let's say on Sundays, you check your applications. You can go in there and check to see, has the university requested any information via email? You can log into your portal and make sure that your transcript shows up there and that they show it as your SAT and ACT score has been received. It's a good thing to keep track of here because let's say you email the university back regarding a question or something they've requested. And then the next week, when you check into this tracker, you can see, oh, last week I sent this email. Now it's the following week. I should follow up and make sure that the university responded. And if they haven't, you can follow up and so forth. So it's important to include the information requested and then the correspondence dates too. And you can see this just keeps on going on here. There's also here a place to include the cost of attendance, and then the expected family contribution. And then once you hear back about decisions for schools where you got in, their scholarship awards, their enrollment deposit deadlines. I should actually put this in red. There was a tragic story that I heard about a student. Well, I wouldn't use the word tragic. I guess in life there are things much more tragic than this, but it was a very disappointing story. A student I did not know personally. It was a friend of one of my students, and the student got into his dream college. So think about, let's say, a top 10 university in the United States. And he was so excited, but he did not note the enrollment deposit deadline and did not put his deposit in time, and he lost his spot. So definitely make sure that you are putting your deposit in by the deadline for the school where you would like to attend. Okay, let me go back here to make sure that I'm covering all the ground that I want to, but this is going to be kind of your launch pad, your basis, your framework for applications. So if you put something into the Common App, you're going to put it in here as well. And then there's also a personal statement tracker here. So I'd like for students to start by including 10 possible personal statement topics, then including what is important to them, how different people would describe them, and then if they would rather focus on one event or multiple events in their essay. And then once you have this all here in one place, try to pick a topic that would illustrate how other people would describe you. Remember, your personal statement is one of the only ways that you're able to truly reveal your personality and who you are to the admissions committee. So make sure that you pick a topic that is able to illustrate what is important to you and also have your personality shine through so that they can get to know you by the time they are done reading your personal statement. So once you have all this in here, I like for students to pick at least 3 personal statement topics, write drafts on those, and then from those drafts, pick one to polish for their actual personal statement. So this process is really important. Rarely I will have a student that has one clear winner for their personal statement. So it's just clear, this is the topic they need to write on, and they can skip the whole process of writing on 3 different topics. But I'll say generally, for the majority of students, you're going to want to write drafts on more than one topic. I will say a note here on ChatGTP by raise of hands. How many of you are familiar with ChatGTP and AI? It's so tempting to use artificial intelligence software to write your essay for you or significantly help you with your essay. But I have looked at the kinds of essays that ChatGTP generates, and those are not the essays that you want to apply with. They are very generic, very fluff. They sound eloquent, they sound nice and fancy, but they are not going to be unique to you. So really challenge yourself to not use AI software to write your essays. You can use, let's see, by a raise of hands, have you ever used Grammarly or heard of Grammarly? So some of you have heard of Grammarly. So I have a paid version of Grammarly where I can input an essay and it will show me any grammatical weaknesses. So that's a great way to use AI software, but you can also use Microsoft Word and put an essay in there and it will show you any punctuation issues or maybe subject verb agreement issues. So Microsoft Word works great too, but I would really limit your use of any AI software. And I have had students in the past where I've worked with them one-on-one and they've sent me essays where it was clear to me that that was not their own draft. It was a draft created by ChatGPT or another AI software. So definitely challenge yourselves to actually write your own essays and not have the internet write it for you or AI software. Okay, so let's look here in the Common App. So I am logged here into my Practice applicant account so that my Common App will look like your Common App. We have our dashboard here. It's empty right now because I do not have any universities in here. I would need to go to a college search and let's just add, whoops. I'm just going to type in Florida. We're going to find the University of Florida and I'm going to add it and we'll add UCF. Why not? FSU. We'll make this very Florida centric. And then when I go back to my dashboard, now I see these universities that I just added. And look how quickly I added that to my dashboard. Now I can add my term or admission plan. So for right now on August 1st, so right now, the Common App for applicants for the next admission cycle is not open yet. On August 1st, the Common App will open up for college applications for the next application cycle. So right now I can only put in fall 24 or summer B 2024, but on August 1st, you'll be able to put in the actual admission plan. Now, once you put your admission plan in there, it updates this dashboard to show the deadline. Okay, so I hope everyone's with me here. So you really want to add your term or admission plan so that you can clearly see your deadlines here on your dashboard. I'm going to pull up the University of Miami for a second to just show you what I was talking about earlier. It's a great way to illustrate. If I go to the University of Miami and I just click on it there, I can see all the fine print here. And look, it really is tiny, isn't it? Other deadline information. To be considered for our premier scholarships, and it's an expensive school, you probably want to be considered for its premier scholarships, you must apply by November 1st, early decision 1 or early action. So if you apply by, let's say, regular decision, which is January 1st, you are not considered for those scholarships. So it's really important once you decide which schools you want to apply to look at the fine print here, to read this through very carefully so that there are no surprises to you when you are applying. So that's just the basics, how we're going to add schools in here. And I see we're almost at 4:30 already, and there's still so much to cover. So I'm going to try to go faster. If we go to the Common App tab here, this is going to be general information that is shared with all of the schools that you're applying to, but you are able, let's say, if you want to use a different personal statement for one school versus another school, or there's other things that you want to tweak, you can do that. So you can edit this between applications. One of the most common mistakes students make, especially students who are applying test optional at some schools, but they are revealing their SAT scores or ACT scores at other schools, is they're forgetting to take that testing information out of here between submitting applications. So if you are applying with your test scores to some schools, you'll of course put that information in here. But if you're applying test optional to a school, you will want to make sure that you go in and you remove that information from your Common App before you go and submit your application to the test optional school. But here, your profile is just very basic information. So your first name, last name, your date of birth. And of course, I was not born in 2009. I was born a long time before that. A lot of this information is just random. Your address, your contact details, your demographics. These should be very easy and fast for you to input in here. how many languages, I can't speak today, you are proficient in, your geography and nationality. And you can see Common App fee waiver here too. You may be eligible for a fee waiver. You can ask your guidance counselor if you think that you may be. You can also check your email and just your mail. A lot of times schools will send out fee waivers to apply there to your email or to your physical mailing address. So make sure to open those emails and look. And sometimes it's based on income, and other times it is just based on achievement. It's not always based on income. Then your family information that I mentioned earlier. This is definitely a trickier section. If your parents are divorced or remarried, it just compounds the amount of information that you need to put in here. So you're going to put in parent one, parent two, step parent, and then you can see even your sibling information goes in there. Going to go fast for that since it's not as important. So the profile and family information should be very straightforward to fill out. I would probably have a parent or adult help you if needed, especially for the family information. Students do not always know that information about their parents that it asks of them. And then your education, your current or most recent secondary high school, you're just going to search for that when you started there, if you're going to graduate from there, what your graduation date is, other secondary or high schools. So sometimes students have attended more than one high school. If that's the case for you, you will have to enter the other school names in here too, and they give you 250 words to provide details about why you attended multiple high schools. Generally speaking, this is going to be just my family moved. So I went to different schools, or I changed the program that I was interested in. So I went to a different school. I have worked with students one-on-one that went to quite a few different high schools, maybe 4, 5, or 6 or more high schools because of suspensions, expulsions, and academic issues, and they still got into college. So if that is you and this makes you really nervous when you start seeing, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to put all that in there, just be honest and upfront with the information, and you can still be okay. And then colleges and universities. If you have taken dual enrollment classes, you will put that information in here, and that should be pretty straightforward. Your grades. So this is the area where I say, ask your guidance counselor for what type of class rank reporting they use, if they even use class rank. And then your GPA should just be available in your school portal. And it's okay if your school does not weight GPA. I know some schools do not. This current or most recent year courses section is the part where I said you really need to be careful after you have submitted your applications to make sure that it's accurate. So if you decide to drop a course that you had listed here, you have to contact every single university where you applied and let them know that you have dropped that course and what you've replaced that course with. The honors section, I would say, is probably the easiest section to fill out. However, it's also the section that is most neglected, I think, by students. I had a Boy Scout. He was going for his Eagle Scout a few years ago, sitting across from me, telling me that he did not have any honors to list in his Common App. This was quite a few years ago. At that point, I was still meeting with students one-on-one in person. Now I'm completely virtual. So we were physically sitting across from each other, and he was in his Boy Scout uniform, and I could see all the patches on his uniform of all the honors that he had received that he didn't realize were honors that he could list in his application. That was the most beautiful example of a student that I've ever encountered having honors that they didn't even realize, and he was physically wearing them. So definitely, if you think, I don't have any honors, ask your guidance counselor, do I have any honors? Ask your mom or your dad or whichever adult you live with, if they can remember honors that you have, sometimes they have a better recollection than you may about things like honors. But generally speaking, students have honors that they have forgotten about. So I have Dean's List on here. I would only really list Dean's List, I think, if you do not have 5 honors to put here, then I would put that on there. If you have more than 5 honors, I would leave off Dean's List because they can probably tell that from your transcript. And you can check with your guidance counselor to see if Dean's List, Provost Honor Roll, so forth is already listed on your transcript. So honor section, then we have community-based organizations, if you received any help with your application. And then your future plans. So this you may change from school to school. So maybe for one school, you are applying as a biology major and you tell them you want to go into medicine, but for another school, you're really interested in their engineering program. So you want to make sure that whatever major you list for the school where you're applying to matches up with your future plans here. And so this would be an area that you could change between submitting applications. And then testing, so this is where you would list your SAT or ACT and other tests that you may have taken and those scores. Activities, you have room for 10 activities, no more than 10. Some schools will allow you to submit a resume. I would only submit a resume if your resume, and usually the resume is optional. I would only submit that resume if it includes information not reflected in the Common App anymore. I worked with identical twins. I've worked with many sets of identical twins, but I worked with one particular set of identical twins that lived in South Florida, and they had way more than 10 activities. I do not think I've ever worked with any students involved in more sports, volunteering, clubs, community engagement, arts and music. They definitely won the prize out of all the students that I've worked with, like just pages and pages of activities. So they definitely needed some sort of resume or to include it in the additional information section. But generally speaking, we're just going to limit it to the 10 most important activities to you. And we're going to list them in order of importance. So you can see this arrow here allows you to move activities down. So you want to make sure that the activities that you list first are the ones that you've participated in the longest and you have made the biggest contribution and you have spent the most amount of time on if you think over the course of a year. So you're going to put your activity type right here. I can't think of what would be a good activity. I'm just going to say athletics. And then you can put the sport or team, the position or leadership description, the organization name, and then you only have 150 characters to describe that activity. So I like for students to put their activities in a Google Doc and not immediately into the Common App, because if you put those activities into a Google Doc, it's a lot easier to get other people's eyes on it and to make sure that you are using those 150 characters to the best of your ability. This pretty much reads like a resume. So you want to make sure that you are using active verbs, you're showing your contributions, and you are being very concise. So let's say your activity was, I'm going to change this to swim, and I'm going to make let's say we're the team captain, and this is for XYZ high school. And you can say participated in weekly meets. That would be kind of a bland statement to put in there. If you had nothing else to say, you could say encouraged teammates. These are all just very general things that you could put in there. Better things to put in here would be one states championship, whatever it's called, in 2023, like 2022, 2023. Put those dates in there. Personal best time, like make it really concrete, use numbers whenever you can, make sure that you're maximizing your contribution. So I would only put participated in weekly meets if you generally have nothing else to say about it. You can probably assume that you participated in weekly meets just by the fact that you are the team captain of a swim team. And then participation grade levels. So activities that are going to be most important are activities that show continuity and that you participated in the longest. So oftentimes I have students come to me that are about to go into their senior years and they want to drop an activity. This is especially common, I think, with gymnasts. Are any of you, by raise of hands, a gymnast? Where gymnasts just burn out by their senior year. They are tired of gymnastics and they don't want to put in the labor anymore for gymnastics. And so they have 9, 10, and 11. We don't generally want to do that. So if you can push through for a senior year, unless you have very good cause not to continue on with that activity, I'd want you to just continue on with that activity so that you can show commitment. Think about, and this is an awful way to think, but think about colleges. They are offering students admission, but they also want to make money. And they want to make sure that when you are choosing to go to their college, that they are going to receive tuition dollars from you for all 4 years, that you are committed. You have demonstrated commitment. So this is one of the ways that you can demonstrate, yes, if I choose your college, I can push through hard times and I can stick it out for all 4 years and pay tuition for all 4 years. So you're going to put your activities in here. So here you can see I have an example, club president for debate speech. Having those numbers in there is really nice for universities to see. So organized weekly meetings and fundraisers raised 8,200 in 2022 and 7,100 in 2021 via car washes, arranged guest speakers, one regionals, not a regionals, just one regionals in 2022. So as much information as you can squeeze in there. And then when you're done adding all the activities, you can hit the preview button and you can see what it's going to look like to schools once they download your applications. So you can see that clearly there, and then you can decide if you want to move up or down something. So let's say being club president of debate speech is more important. I moved swim down, so now that shows up first. And that would be more important if, let's say, you were in debate speech for 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, right? So we can see if I change that, now it shows as 9, 10, 11, and 12. A common question I get from students is if they have an activity that it's variable, let's say it varies how much time they contribute each week. We would just take the average. So you would think about, okay, if this is an activity you're involved in over the school year, how many hours total do you spend on that activity over the course of the school year? Let's say you're on the homecoming committee and at a certain time of the year, you're really busy with it, but you're not spending that many hours every week on it. So then you would just create the average for what's your average time commitment, hours spent per week during the school year, if it's something that you worked on during the school year. I also sometimes have students that think it's important to be well-rounded. By raise of hands, how many of you think it's really important to be well-rounded? And that is drilled into us in some way, but it's not as important as you may think for college applications to be well-rounded. Sure, it's great if you are well-rounded, but if your activities show that you have a special interest, don't try to omit information to make it sound like you're more well-rounded than you are. I had a high school soccer player that I was helping one-on-one with their applications, and she did club soccer, soccer through her high school. She was a soccer coach. She did soccer in probably 5 different ways, and I knew that she was really committed to all these different ways of playing soccer and teaching soccer, coaching soccer, because it was so hard to find time to meet with her one-on-one. So I was well aware that she was heavily involved with soccer. And how surprised was I when I pulled up her Common App as an advisor and I could preview her application, and soccer was only listed one time. She listed school soccer. And I immediately texted her and asked her, "What about all the other soccer?" And she said, "Well, I thought it looked bad to have all that soccer in my application." It did not look bad. It looked like it was empty because what was she doing with all of her time? It was only listing school soccer and barely anything else. So if you have something that you're really interested in and you are participating in it through your school and outside of school and all sorts of different ways, don't try to omit information or minimize that interest. It's something that's special about you and that makes you unique. So don't be shy about listing that information here. Something else to say about activities is it's not just school sponsored activities. So if you have something out of school, like a family responsibility, I had a student that helped his grandmother every week with groceries and yard work and tasks around the home. And that was an activity for him. It took several hours a week that he participated in. I once had a student, and this student actually ended up at UF who barely had any activities. I think the student had one club, maybe, and let's say two high school clubs, and maybe a high school sport from like ninth grade to include in the activities list. And I was a little bit concerned knowing the student wanted to go to UF and other schools of, okay, what are we going to put in his activity section? And it turned out he had a lot of activities: paddle boarding every week, going fishing every week, weightlifting, teaching himself drums. There were so many activities to list there that were not school sponsored and were his own special interests and pursuits outside of school. And that student ended up at UF. So if your activities are not all through school, or you think maybe you don't have activities, really take a hard look at where you're putting your time, and you may find that you have more activities than you realize. Okay, then last, or not last, second to last here, we have writing. And this is your personal statement. And you can see here it's required for some of these schools and it's not required for some. And sometimes when it's not required, you can still submit it. And I do encourage you to submit your personal statement, even if it's not required, if it allows you to. You can see there are several topic suggestions here that you can pick from, or you can share an essay on any topic of your choice. And I generally recommend that students just come up with their own topic. Okay, let's go back here to my iPad and go through. Okay, so test scores, SAT versus ACT. And if you at any point have any questions, please put those in the chat box so I can go back and see those in the chat box. So if you ever have a question, if you want me to go back over something, I know I just covered a lot of ground really quickly, please feel free to share those questions in the chat box. Okay, so for test scores, SAT versus ACT, both are okay. Schools don't really favor one over the other. I will say for students applying to 7-year medical programs, I see the ACT more often for those students just because it has the science section, but they can still get into those programs using the SAT. SAT subject tests have pretty much been eliminated, and fewer schools are now test optional than were right around COVID. So the COVID period was basically the glory days for test optional schools, and that is now kind of dissipating. And schools are starting to require the SAT again. I cannot speak today. I taught a course this morning and it took all my words from me. So submitting scores to schools is your responsibility, not the responsibility of your guidance counselor. Responsibility. I can't spell anymore either. There we go. or I can't spell one word while saying another word, which I think is pretty common. I will say about the SAT and ACT, and if you are going into your senior year and you're planning to retake either, you should register now if you haven't already, because spots are filling up. And I have seen little news articles and chatter about there not being enough spots for the SAT and the ACT this fall, and that students are having to drive hours from their homes to go take those tests. And I think this is a side effect of more schools now requiring the SAT and or the ACT, and there just not being enough test dates. So if you are planning to take the SAT or the ACT this fall and you have not registered for them yet, make sure that you make those a priority. So application fees for schools are generally $0 to $80. I'll say that around 30 to 50 is on average. Fee waivers can be received from your guidance counselor or directly from the schools. Transcripts are going to be your guidance counselor's role. So your guidance counselor has to go and submit those transcripts. Mid-year transcripts will be received by all schools where you are applying to. Your final transcript will only go to the school that you are planning to attend, so to one school. It is your responsibility to make sure that your guidance counselor sent those transcripts. That's why it is so important to keep track of your applications using that Google Sheet that I shared with all of you, and to log into the portals after you've submitted your applications and make sure that they have received your transcripts by the application deadline. So that's really your responsibility, even though it's your guidance counselor's role to submit those transcripts. Letters of recommendation. So they're not going to be required by all schools. Generally, you're going to be asking teachers, preferably ones that relate to your major. Oops. Relate to major. So if you are planning to select a biology major, you would ask your biology teacher for a recommendation letter. If you are planning to study journalism, you may ask your AP Lang teacher for a recommendation. So teachers will be most common. You can also ask coaches or people that supervise you in a volunteering position. I like for students and universities like for students to ask teachers or coaches that are more recent, so in 11th or 12th grade. If you have some kind of issue where you change schools, or your favorite teacher that you thought you were going to get a recommendation letter from quit or retired, you can deviate from this and ask somebody else. So this is just the ideal, but it doesn't have to be from 11th or 12th grade. It's just the ideal. Then when should you ask? Preferably, you should ask the spring of 11th grade. If you have not asked yet and you are going into your senior year, I would pretty much ask the first week back at school if you don't have a way to contact those teachers or coaches now for recommendation letters. For a lot of schools, you're going to need 0. If a school does require recommendation letters, they generally require 1 to 2 recommendation letters. What 2 things should you always give to your recommenders? The first thing is going to be documentation, like a resume or information about yourself outside of their class. You're also going to tell them what you enjoyed about their course. What about their class was meaningful to you? Or if you made a contribution to their class, you'll want to remind them of that. And then you always want to follow up with a thank you after they've written that recommendation letter. Once you get to college, you may apply to clubs or internships or other positions like research opportunities. And then what do you know? They ask for recommendation letters again. And you may have to contact that high school teacher and you want to leave a good impression. So make sure that you follow it up with that thank you note because you may need a recommendation letter from them again. And it's just a nice thing to do. So we already touched on essays, the personal statement, how important it is to proofread your entire application, but it's especially important to proofread and revise your personal statement. So I help students and I have helped students with their personal statements and their applications for many, many years now. And my busiest time of the year is over the summer for a lot of high achieving students come to me the summer before senior year with their personal statements. But then I get super, super busy in October, November, December. Just the way that an accountant that helps people with their personal taxes get really busy in the spring, right around tax day. I get super busy in the fall, and oftentimes students will come to me a day or two before applications are due, and I have to turn them away because I just am too swamped. I do not have time to look at more essays or applications, and that just really knocks the wind out of my sails when I have to do that. So make sure that you give yourself, I'm just going to say here, an early start to these. Do not underestimate the amount of time it takes to write a solid personal statement and how much time it may take to write those supplemental essays. It really takes a lot of time to perfect them and to get them where they need to be. I can think of probably only one student I've ever had that the first draft on the one topic that was the clear winner was almost ready to be submitted. One student, and that is out of thousands of students that I have helped. So one student. It's really important to give yourself enough time. Remember, I said earlier in today's workshop, and I may have said so many things that you didn't notice that I said this. What was I going to say? I already forgot. I totally lost your early start. Oh, that your personal statement, I remember what I was going to say. So it's been a long day for me already. Your personal statement is as important as your GPA, as your activities, your honors, your test scores on the SAT or ACT, and you spend years or months practicing for the SAT or ACT. You spend years working on that GPA and all your activities. So you need to give your essay the same or a similar amount of attention to make sure that you get it great. Okay, financial aid on October 1st, those open up. So those are important for you to submit. You're generally going to have your parents, this is for your parents, to fill out. You need to fill out your FAFSA for most schools, even if you are not planning to get need-based aid. I see Kennedy asked here, I'm preparing for the ACT. What is the latest date I should take it the last time? So that's a great question, Kennedy. For the ACT or the SAT, it really depends on each individual school. Most Florida schools will take the November, December date for those tests and still count it towards admission, but it's going to vary for each school, and that information will be available on their websites. For Bright Futures, you have until the summer after you graduate. So if you're going into your 12th grade here, you have until next summer to get the score that you need for Bright Futures. Of course, it's to your benefit to get that score earlier rather than later. So it doesn't just help you with your scholarships, it also helps you with your applications. Okay, lingo you should know. Early action versus early decision. Early decision is legally binding. So with early decision, you are applying early and you are saying, I am not applying to other schools, early decision, and I will attend your school if you accept me, regardless of what kind of financial aid you offer me. Early action, you are just applying early and it is not binding, but early decision is binding. The candidate's reply date agreement is what I mentioned earlier that's in that Google sheet where you need to accept that offer of admission. Once they admit you, you're not done. You have to put in your deposit and accept that offer of admission. Class rank, I think you should probably all know. Coalition application that is like the Common App for other schools. So these two are both application services that are centralized. Your FERPA waiver, you should select in the Common App, and that basically waives your right to look at what your recommenders said about you. So only ask people that you know are going to have positive things to say about you to recommend you. The priority date or deadline, like we saw for the University of Miami, is often used for scholarships. So there's the regular application date, but if you apply by a certain date, you get special treatment for scholarships. Rolling admission means they are looking at applications as they get them. So when you apply earlier, you hear back earlier, pretty much. SAT subject tests are generally not used anymore. They are a thing of the past. And then sometimes you may be put on a waiting list, and this is so school specific. Some schools just put you on a waiting list and you have to wait to hear back if a spot opens. Other schools may put you on a waiting list and give you the opportunity to write an essay or update information about yourself to get off that waiting list. Okay, the personal statement, and we're pretty much out of time. So I am going to touch on the personal statement, and I'm also going to share a link here for you to give me feedback on today's workshop. And that's what I use to know if you learned something. And it also helps me plan future workshops for other students. So let me just grab it from my website and drop it here in the chat so you can have it. And then we are going to talk a little bit about the personal statement and I will let you all go. If you have another commitment and you need to leave, remember today's workshop is recorded and I will not be offended if you need to go. Someone asked, is class rank based off the scores on the SAT and ACT? No, class rank is based off of your GPA and the difficulty of classes that you have taken. So if you are taking APs and getting A's on them, that's going to boost your class rank. So I just shared the anonymous evaluation form with you, and that's really helpful to me if you take the time to fill that out once we end this workshop. For the personal statement, it is important to keep it specific if at all possible. Sometimes students will have more than one topic to write on, and if that is you, that is okay. There are exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, I do find it's easier for students when they just write on one topic. Think about things not in the application. So you really don't want to be redundant here. You want to offer new information about yourself that is not elsewhere in the application. If you choose to write about a sport or achievement already listed elsewhere in your application, make sure that you are providing new information, a unique perspective. There is a lot of information to be found about do's and don'ts about the personal statement, and it can feel very overwhelming once you start reading all of those articles that do exist on the internet about that. But I find that the personal statement is so unique that it's really impossible to give blanket advice to everyone. I will say, though, that generally speaking, if you are able to avoid writing about your sport or something that is listed in your application already, it's going to be a lot easier to avoid pitfalls. However, I have had students do really well, even if they choose to write about their sport or something listed in their application. I'm going to drop another link here in the chat box. Let me just go ahead and grab it here from my Google Drive. I'm going to give you some personal statement examples to look through on your own time. I think I have it here. There we go. Oops. And I'm going to copy the link and put the link in the chat box. If I can get the chat box to pull up. Oh, there we go. I have so many. Where is my chat? Windows open, that it's sometimes hard to find. So this document you can go through on your own time, but all of the students that wrote these essays did really well with the college admissions process. And by reviewing these, you'll be able to see kind of the pattern that they use to write their personal statement. So they start with a first person account generally that puts the reader right there with them in an experience, and then they describe why that specific experience was meaningful to them. That's pretty much the blueprint for a personal statement, but for the sake of time, I'm going to share that whole set of documents with you. Let me see what else I have here. I won't go into that one right now. Okay, I see I have another question here. Let me see if I answered it yet. I already answered it. So that's great. Okay, writing a draft, like I mentioned before, be prepared to write several drafts and don't get bogged down with the details when you are writing a draft. So if you get stuck with the first paragraph on a draft, you can just write insert first paragraph here or insert sentence about something right here. Make sure that you're really honest when you are writing your personal statement. One of the best personal statements I've ever read in a class environment, so it was a course I was teaching in a brick and mortar building, was by a student. And I told her, I was like, wow, this is one of the best personal statement drafts I've ever read. And she said it was not true. She had made everything up. So make sure that you're truthful in your personal statement. Don't make things up. Be truthful. And then, of course, focus on your strengths. Make sure that you are not negative about yourself in your personal statement. You want to put your best foot forward. Does anyone have any questions before I let you go today? We're about to wrap up here, but I do want to give you a minute. I know we covered a lot of ground. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Remember, you have the carlaberry.com/evaluation form. I'll resend that real quickly here that you can use for an anonymous evaluation, and that helps me know what you gained from today's workshop and what you might like to see in the future. Good luck with your applications, everyone. I hope to see you back here for future workshops, and have a great rest of your summer. Bye-bye.